me join me in prayer. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, after church today, Patrice and I are going to get in the car and drive east to visit our families in Pennsylvania. It's been a long time since I've been back, and I'm looking forward to being with the family again. My older sister is turning 60 this year on the 4th of January, and so the entire family is gathering to celebrate that momentous occasion. My niece Jennifer and her husband Eric are flying in from Denver, and my nephew Adam is driving over from Harrisburg, and rumor has it he's bringing a young woman that he's been seeing, so that's like a big moment. The reveal. My brother, my younger brother, and my mother who lives with them will be hosting us, and it'll just be nice to have everyone together. We'll also be heading down to Ardmore, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia, to spend New Year's Eve with two of Patrice's older sisters and their spouses. We've been texting back and forth for the past 2 weeks, trying to work out the details of the great feast that we're all looking forward to preparing during the day on New Year's Eve. It's part of what makes the Christmas holiday special. Families that are spread out all over the country come home. Even though our lives have carried us off into many different places, during the holidays we set aside our work, we leave our separate communities, and we all come together to celebrate our family ties. It's comforting to be reunited with people who have accompanied us all throughout our life's journeys. Our families surround us at every significant milestone in life, births and deaths, graduations and weddings, birthdays and anniversaries. They accompany us through our proud moments of accomplishment, and they support us during our difficult moments of struggle. They laugh with us and cry with us and rejoice with us and mourn with us. They know the long arc of our individual histories, and they know the stories of the ancestors who preceded us, who passed on their legacy of traditions and values and practices that have been incorporated into our own lives. The beauty of our holiday gatherings is that they remind us that we are never alone in life. No matter where our journeys take us, we will always be connected to family. But our families also know all of the secrets that we just as soon keep hidden. All of the stories that we don't like to tell. All of the memories that we try hard to forget. They know about the irresponsible behaviors that have adversely affected the lives of the people we're connected to. The hurt feelings, the divisions caused by divorce and dissension. They know why certain siblings can't get along. They know why certain pictures are never on display. They know the real story behind that uncle that no one talks about. They know all of the failures and fights and feuds. They know all of the things that we don't want anyone to know about. None of our families are perfect. We all have skeletons in our closets, and eventually those doors get opened when the family gathers, and we are reminded of some of the things that we'd just as soon forget. That's the downside of our holiday family gatherings. Well, this morning we were reminded that Matthew begins his nativity story with the family history. His gospel starts out with a genealogy that traces the connection between Jesus and all of the great leaders in the history of Judaism. It's more symbolic than historic. The genealogy is Matthew's way of letting us know that Jesus is part of that long arc of Israel's salvation history. The same God who formed the covenants with Abraham and David was forming a new covenant with Jesus. But what's interesting about the family tree that Matthew recalls is that it includes the names of 4 women. That's a peculiar thing in a patriarchal culture where lineage is established through the male descendants. But what's even more peculiar is that they are all women with unconventional sexual histories. And none of them were Jewish. They were all adopted into the family of Jesus by marriage. Matthew tells us that there were skeletons in the family closet of the Son of God. For the next few months, we're going to be following a book by the Scottish theologian and musician John Bell entitled 10 Things They Never Told Me About Jesus. Now that we've celebrated his birth, it seems only fitting that we spend some significant time thinking more deeply about the meaning and significance of his life for us. In the first chapter of his book, John Bell writes about a worship service that he attended in an Episcopal church where the priest started reading the genealogy of Jesus from Matthew's gospel, the very text that we read this morning. But every time he got to one of the 4 women named in the genealogy, someone in the congregation stood up and told a story to introduce that relative to the rest of the congregation. It was kind of like being at a family reunion for the first time and having someone fill you in on all of the scandalous backstories. Judah was one of the 12 sons of Jacob, and his son Er married a Canaanite woman named Tamar. Er was wicked in the sight of the Lord, according to the text, and died without fathering a son. Get it? Er had no heirs. In accordance with the practice of Levirate marriage, Judah commanded his next oldest son to take Tamar as his wife, and he also died without producing an heir. Now Judah had a third son, but after watching the way the first 2 fared in their marriages with Tamar, he was understandably reluctant to pass him on, and so he didn't. But without a husband, And without an heir, Tamar had no way of providing for herself. She had no land, no property, no income. So one day she dressed as a whore and sat at a crossroad where she attracted the attention of her father-in-law, who mistook her for a prostitute and bargained to have sex with her in exchange for a goat. Perez, the child Tamar bore from having sex with her father-in-law Judah, is the son through whom Jesus' lineage is traced. There are skeletons in the closet of the Son of God. Rahab was the Canaanite prostitute who sheltered two Hebrew spies who snuck into the city of Jericho to scout out its defenses. When the king of Jericho discovered the infiltrators and came searching, Rahab hid them on her roof and then helped them escape by dropping a rope from her bedroom window, from which they lowered themselves over the city wall. In exchange for her help, Rahab bargained to have her family spared when Joshua's army destroyed the city of Jericho. From then on, this Canaanite prostitute lived among the Hebrew people. Eventually, Rahab married Salmon, and Boaz, their son, is named as one of the descendants of Jesus. There are skeletons in the closet of the Son of God. Ruth, you may recall, was a Moabite widow who accompanied her Jewish mother-in-law, Naomi, back to Bethlehem after the famine had ended. Naomi concocted a plan for Ruth to sneak onto the threshing floor and lie with Boaz, the wealthy landowner who had allowed them to glean in his fields after the harvesters had finished. Ruth, the Moabite, ended up marrying Boaz, and their son, Obed, was the grandfather of King David. There are skeletons in the closet of the Son of God. Bathsheba was the beautiful woman that King David lusted after when he saw her bathing from his rooftop. She was married to a soldier named Uriah who was off fighting the Ammonites, but David took her as his lover. When Bathsheba became pregnant, the king secretly arranged to have her husband slain on the battlefield so that no one would know that the child she was carrying was not his. That child died shortly after birth, but David married Bathsheba, and their second child was named Solomon, who became the wisest king ever to reign over the people Israel. There are skeletons in the closet of the Son of God. Those are the only 4 women named in Matthew's genealogy of Jesus. None of them are Jews. They're all foreigners. And they all have sexual histories that would have been considered scandalous in their day. So why does Matthew include them? It isn't an historically accurate or complete birth record. By Matthew's own admission, it's a symbolic genealogy composed of 14 generations from Abraham to David, and 14 generations from David to the Babylonian exile, and 14 generations from exile to Jesus. So why name these 4 women? What's Matthew trying to tell us by writing them into his genealogy? Why expose the skeletons in Jesus' ancestral closet? Matthew's original audience knew all of those stories. He wrote his gospel to Jews who were familiar with the Hebrew Scriptures. When they heard the 4 women named at the very beginning of Matthew's gospel, they knew that Jesus' authority did not come from the purity of his pedigree. He was not born into privilege. It wasn't biology, but theology that defined Jesus' authority. His legitimacy wasn't genetic, it came from the truth of the gospel that he proclaimed. We trust him and follow him and obey him, not because of who his ancestors were, but because we know that the same God who was at work through Abraham and Sarah, blessing all the families of the earth, and the same God who was at work in David, establishing a reign of justice and righteousness, is the same God who is working through Jesus and his followers throughout the generations to reconcile the whole world in love. Perhaps more than anything else, Matthew wants us to know that God's redemptive love isn't reserved for those who are pure, those who have no regrets, those who never made bad choices, those who never did anything wrong or caused any harm to another human being. On the contrary, God's redemptive love works through the messiness of human frailty to heal the brokenness of the whole world. There are none who are excluded, none who are beyond redemption, none who are unworthy of God's mercy and God's grace. The love of Jesus doesn't hide the skeletons in the closet. It heals them. Our histories connect us to our ancestors, but our histories also connect us to the long arc of God's salvation history. The same God who called Jesus my beloved on the day of his baptism is the same God who has claimed us and will not let us go. That's the lineage that we claim as our own. It's not exclusive. It does not require us to keep our skeletons locked in the closet. On the contrary, it calls us to bring all of our skeletons out into the light of day and to trust that God's impartial love can heal the brokenness of the whole world. That's the kind of family reunion that happens here. Every time 2 or more are gathered in this space to proclaim the good news. of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Amen.